What's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where a Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. So I'm, of course, Faisal, representing the UK. I'm currently working from Dubai at the moment. And, of course, we've got Andrew representing Stars and Stripes. How are you today, bud?
Life is good, my dude. I cannot complain. It's a dreary, rainy day here in Ohio, which I actually like to bunker down and work during those kind of days. So I'm happy with this.
Nice. It's we're the opposite. We're obviously getting a lot warmer here at the moment, which is quite scary at the same time. But yeah, it's exciting to end to the season, looking to kind of like break this one down for us as well, and also for our audience as well. So we've got a few things we want to cover. Naturally, obviously, end of the season, we're going to try and have a little pick at the Premier League. We'll have a look at also the top 5 leagues as well. So we've got France League, the French League, Bundesliga, of course. We'll have a breakdown of Bayer Leverkusen and see if they were actually Bayer Leverkusen. And we've got some quite interesting talking points as well we want to do, which we'll cover later on as well. We've obviously got our Nutmegged and, of course, our Take It or Leave It. So excited to get stuck into this episode. So before anything, and I've not mentioned it at the beginning of this episode because I feel like, I don't want to get too excited, right? As Man United fans, it's something that we're very proud of today. Now we are anyway. Manchester United are FA Cup champions. They beat Man City 2-1 on the weekend. Andrew, I'm going to give you that much. Andrew, thoughts on the match? And where is your head at with Manchester United? Where does that leave Manchester United?
Nothing changes for me in terms of being excited or disappointed with Manchester United. If people have listened to previous episodes, you'll know that I am very low on my expectation for Manchester United right now. This FA Cup win is exciting. It was cool. They actually looked like there were some glimpses of the old Manchester United where it was fun to watch them, exciting. They actually knew how to play beautiful looking soccer. The issue for me is that in the FA Cup against a Manchester City team where Manchester City has already won the league. There's already those stories out there about it being historic because it's the 4th in a row for City and for Pep. So it's almost like this is like a little extra game that they had to play that maybe their heads weren't in it completely, which is my guess as to why they just didn't look like the typical City. And maybe the miraculous type of playing from Manchester United just caught City by surprise. But again, overall, if I'm just looking at the match and saying, okay, United showed some glimpses of what they could do, and then City just didn't look like they were on their game. That is the issue for me with United. If you flip a coin under Ten Hag, you never know what's going to happen. It could end up being a good game, which we've seen throughout the season. It could be not a great game, which we've also seen throughout the season. There's just no continuity with the structure that he's created at United and the style of play that he likes to roll with, which is a little bit less structured for my taste. So I don't really read too much into this game. Like, it's cool to get a piece of silverware. I don't think it will save Ten Hag's job. And overall, I feel the exact same about United as I did before, because like I always say, get the back office and the front office structured, and then I'll actually start to feel good about Manchester United heading in a good direction.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think that we had a lot of Man United fans coming out of the woodwork. There was a lot of us kind of going a bit crazy, thinking we'll wait to next season, feeling like maybe we've had a really good season. And for me, I'm with you. I think it didn't really... It didn't add anything different to our season at the moment. Yeah, it was we were finished 8th. The only, I suppose, bonus side of it for me was, in a technicality, we technically moved 2 places up. So with that, us becoming Europa League, which is good to attract players, obviously, but also thinking more so of the fact that Chelsea dropped down into the Europa Conference League, which is going to be an interesting one. I mean, it's European football, but they weren't something they weren't expecting. So as a rival of Manchester United, that's quite sweet to have as well in our back pocket. And also we had Newcastle obviously drop out completely our European contention for last season, for this season as well. So interesting kind of win, if you would say. I mean, performances overall, like you said, it was one of our best performances, I would say. Some of the passing in there was incredible, and some of the actual play was great. Yeah, City were off it. And I think people were more celebrating that we beat City than we did actually win the FA Cup. I think that's probably where there's a bit of excitement, is like, hey, look what we've done, especially all the things that were in the media about Ten Hag, which for me was not great. Having to have that hang around, loom over the match, just that, will he be sacked into this game? You can imagine that feeling in the dressing room, and have people swirl around and talk about whether you're going to be in a job after the end of the game and you're about to line up your team for an FA Cup final. It's not nice. So yeah, overall, pretty solid performance, and again, happy with it. We'll take European football. My question for yourself on that in particular was, so obviously Man United, now we've won a trophy this season. Do you think we've had a better, this isn't my take or leave, by the way, it could be, do you think Manchester United have had a better season than Arsenal this year?
Better than Arsenal?
Yeah.
No. I would slap anyone in the face who says yes to that question, because I get the argument where saying if you win a piece of silverware, that can then be considered a successful season for you. However, for the people that are answering that question with a yes, that means that their view of Manchester United is so much lower than what it used to be, because we used to be at the pinnacle. Like, we were the best team that everyone aimed to be. We were City back then. We were winning everything. It was fun to watch. It's like, for Americans, the New York Yankees. Like, everyone knows the Yankees in the MLB. We're talking baseball. And that's what Manchester United used to be. Everyone used to hate them because they were so good all the time and so consistent. Now it's spun into Manchester City. Everyone kind of hates them because they're so good all the time and tough to beat. Like, it used to be that way. So now it's saying in a season where, okay, cool, well, we kind of ended up having a sucky season, but we won the FA Cup. Like, that's cool. That's a successful season. Shut up and get out of my face. That is not a successful season for what Manchester United used to be and should be anymore. Talking about Arsenal really quickly, I think they had an overall solid season. They're where they wanted to be, competing for a title. So I would say overall, Arsenal definitely had a more successful season because they're where they want to be, fighting for the top spot in the Premier League, as opposed to like finishing 8th, but then luckily just getting into the Europa League because we won the FA Cup. Just totally different worlds for me.
Yeah, bang on. I think there were a lot of fans out there thinking, well, there's no trophy for second in all competitions. Champions League, for example, like performances across other European football, whether it be FA Cup, Carling, Carling or League Cup. We call it the Carling Cup from back in the day, for many of our audience knows. So yeah, I totally agree. We've sunk that low to almost feel like we've had so people would think that we've had a more successful season just because we won a trophy. But it's kind of a case of, we have a prize, you don't. And it's like, well, you think about it across the board. You think about it like performance-wise, like you said, they're ahead of us by miles. They're ahead of most clubs as well by miles. So shout out to Arsenal for the getting their trophy, nearly their trophy. I think that's where we'll leave it there. So do you want to break down? So I mean, we're leaving now, Manchester United. You can see we're like, fair play. We'll keep it moving, and we'll look forward to next season. Really quickly before we move on to the leagues, thoughts on, what do you think? Is Ten Hag? Are you in? Are you Ten Hag in or out? And then secondly, do you see him next season? Like, is that the plan for us?
I have historically been a fan of keeping Ten Hag, and I am more of the ilk where I would rather give managers more time than they're typically allowed at clubs. Like, you see Poch agreeing kind of to be sacked, so that it was a mutual parting at Chelsea. So if he gets enough time at Chelsea, I think he ends up being successful, because he ended up getting that team looking strong, but being there for just a season, that is not enough time to create the structure that you want. So same with Ten Hag, and same with the managers before. I have always said, give them time to do what they need to do. My caveat to that is, of course, mutual agreements, whatever, go do your thing. Maybe Poch understood that Chelsea is just such a mess, he wanted to get out. That's funny. I'm curious to see what some of the storylines are after we learn a bit more about that situation. But with the Ten Hag thing, I just don't see his style of play working with, one, the current players that we have with Manchester United, and two, really in a competitive landscape in the Premier League. So again, I talked about his style of play in a previous episode, but in a summary, really quickly, he just doesn't like to maintain a lot of possession. He wants to quickly try to play down those wings and sprint onto the ball to get behind the defense, which is a good tactic to use in certain situations. But if that's your overall game plan and strategy, I don't think you're going to be able to compete with the Cities, the Liverpools, the Arsenals out there. You're going to have to figure out more of an actual structured strategy. So that's why, for me, I don't think he'll end up lasting throughout this offseason, and I prefer that he would not. This all conversation goes back to me saying last episode that it doesn't really matter what manager you bring in. Maybe you'll see like that manager bump, and I would like to see better strategy utilized with the players that we have. But overall, I'm not going to be excited about a manager until we get the back and front office sorted and we actually have management in place where it needs to be, so the structure of the club can end up supporting the manager as opposed to hurting it, which is currently what's going on right now.
The structure is so important. As a club, if you don't have that foundation, it can really affect the backroom staff, but also eventually get into the first team. And it is, it's really sad to see. We're hoping like some more positive things for next season. Before we get into the leagues, let's look at some of the bigger results that happened in cup finals, shall we say. The Europa League final finished recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago, last week, I think it was. And it was, of course, by Leverkusen versus the one and only Atalanta, which was not in the script. The result was not in the script. Andrew, do you briefly want to just sort of touch on that game for us?
Yeah, it is a little bit disappointing because everyone, I think, other than Atalanta and their fans, wanted to see Leverkusen pull off the perfect season with having no defeats throughout, which would have been awesome. But it just goes to show you, so Leverkusen ends up losing 3-0 to Atalanta, and Atalanta just looked like the better team overall. And honestly, Lookman specifically looked like just an amazing player on the pitch and quite a solid player as well. Like, yeah, you just love to see players that you think maybe have passed the prime or their opportunity, the window where they could end up being a dominant player. But then Lookman coming in, scoring the 12th, 26th, and 75th minute to snag that Hattie. You love that. So cheers to our boy over there. And I think he's fit in nicely with this Atlanta squad. And this, again, I will continue to preach this. Atlanta are a good team, as obviously they make it to the Europa League final. Being able to do that, not necessarily with a star-studded squad, but a lot of good core players that know how to play in their system, that have specific roles that they can knock out. Love to see teams be successful with that model. With this being said, the scoreline is a little bit sad for Leverkusen, which is a little prelude to what we'll talk about in a little bit and my specific take it or leave it. But yeah, just not their night. And it goes to show you how difficult it is to do what they have done this season, to go undefeated for so long and to have injuries not be a problem, to have stamina not be a problem. But they were competing in so many different tournaments. And while they're also in the league at the same time, so it's just so difficult to do. And you could kind of see it's just at the end of the season, there's just a little bit missing. And you totally understand that after the amazing season that they had. So no shade to them. We wish it would have ended better for the narrative piece, but congratulations to Atalanta and Lookman. Love to see that. So up the boys in Italy.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. I mean, it couldn't put it any better. It was an incredible solo performance. If you haven't watched some of the highlights of that game, genuinely check it out. Lookman, some of the goals are fantastic. Just the conviction behind the ball. It felt like a guy on a mission, and it's really great to see. For football, also, it just really kind of almost shocked the world a bit. Really interesting to see that Europa to League final. Like I said, we'll break down, as you spoke about, I'm sure, by Leverkusen later on in the show in particular. We have the Europa Conference League happening this evening, actually, which is going to be Olympiacos versus Fiorentina. So still some more European football coming through. Of course, we have the biggest of biggest nights of European, the showstopper, the final curtain raising in terms of European football to end off the season is, of course, Borussia Dortmund take on Real Madrid, which is a juicy one. And perhaps maybe we'll see an upset too. We shall see. Yeah, are you excited for that one? What are your thoughts?
I'm excited. My last take it or leave it situation that I explained is I think Real Madrid will win handedly against Dortmund. I still am in that camp. It's just hard for me to go against a Real Madrid squad that are in form, that have come off of an exciting win, that have the momentum, and plus in a Champions League final, who is going to bet against Real Madrid unless you're in the yellow and black kits? So it's just tough for me to see a way for Dortmund to get through Real Madrid with all of those different factors going against them. With that being said, I hope it's an exciting game. I have really no horse that I'm backing specifically in this match. I am just more so here for drama and the excitement. So I'm hoping that Dortmund are able to take some of the momentum from their previous win to get to the final and then are able to do something exciting with it, because I just want to watch some good soccer ultimately. Who you got in this? Who you taking prediction wise? I'll say specifically I will take Real Madrid, but what's your thought on this?
Anyone betting against Real Madrid in a final, I feel like whoever it is will lose money. It's just, this probably end up being clipped now on it and just be when Dortmund inevitably end up winning. But I just can't see it happening at the moment. As much as perhaps Man United beating Man City, many people didn't see happening, right? Could it be a shot? I just feel like, as I said before in the previous episode, it felt a bit like, for me, Real Madrid, their pedigree at cup finals and just the season they're having, and also to top it all off, Jude Bellingham is fairly untouchable now in terms of one of the most unformed players right now in the world, I would say, in world football. So I just don't see it happening, but it will be the shocks genuinely all shocks. Not to sort of any offense to Dortmund, but just how good Real Madrid have been. I just don't see it happening, but best of luck to them.
I agree. I would love to see Marco Reus get his send-off after winning the Champions League. So I'm definitely backing him in that corner. And like I said, I'll be happy as long as the result is some good soccer and it creates some excitement. So that's what I'm happy about. Do you want to break down the winners of each league now that we have our seasons fully concluded?
Yeah, of course. We'll break that down. So let's start Italian league. Let's hit to the Italian league first. So top three out of there was Inter Milan, which I think a throwback, a good season, solid performances, and had a fairly a good amount of points in comparison to AC Milan. So nice to see that Inter Milan AC Milan rivalry there, which is really great to see that coming back now as well. So Inter Milan 89 points. With AC Milan at 76 points, and Juventus on 54 points. So that's the top three there. Italian football in general had a very, very good season in terms of potentially having up to 6 teams in the Champions League next season, which will be really interesting and exciting to see. Obviously, Atlanta, Bologna as well having a great season, and then Roma bringing up that top 6. So that'll be the next season for football, which is great to see for European football as well. So excited to see how the Italian football does, and also how Italians do in the Euros in the European League, right? In terms of the upcoming Euros. So that'll be an interesting one to see.
Well, I do have a soft spot in my heart for Italy because I actually lived and studied there for 6 months. So I always like paying attention to what's going on. And I stayed right outside of Rome. So anytime Roma does well, I'm happy. So I could have liked to have seen them a little bit higher up there, but at least they're tucking in the top 6. So happy to see that. But now let's turn our attention to what is probably the most popular and highest quality league of them all, chilling in England. We're talking Premier League. Now, being Manchester United fans, not the best season overall for us, but it did end up being a fun title race to watch. So we'll have the quick look at what our table ended up looking like. We have Man City, unfortunately, sitting at the top. Not my prediction, but I believe it is what you predicted to happen, and pretty much a safe bet. So we understand with Pep there, with the unlimited money, and with the players that they have at their disposal, always looks likely that they're going to be title challengers at the lowest. Then Arsenal, they're trying to push through, trying to claim that title after it's been maybe 20 years since they have had their last title. Sitting at the top of the Premier League, they got close. So they ended with 89 points, City with 91. So it did come down to the final day. Not the most exciting final day, but things could have swung in different ways, and it ended up with City on top, Arsenal 2. Liverpool, we kind of saw where they were going to sit third in the table after just with a few weeks remaining in the Premier League. I had predicted Liverpool sitting at the top at the end, which unfortunately they just couldn't hold it out. They did have a lot of injuries and some struggles throughout the season, but were able to ride those fairly well and just didn't have the stamina to keep pushing into the end of the season and Klopp's last season. So unfortunate end for them on both of those fronts. Then we have Aston Villa. They finish in fourth. A little bit surprising, but very exciting. I love seeing more of those underdog, more of those middle table teams ending up doing well and getting into those higher places. So congrats to them. Having some fun in the Champions League next season. Looking forward to that. Tottenham in fifth, kind of where I expected them to be. I still do think that they have the structure and the players where they can compete for some of those top spots. Then we'll run through the less important spots now. We have Chelsea at 6, Newcastle at 7, United at 8. Very unfortunate spot for them. West Ham in 9th, Crystal Palace 10, Brighton 11, Bournemouth 12, Fulham 13, Wolves 14, Everton 15, Brentford 16, Nottingham Forest escaping relegation at 17. And last episode, we broke down the losers that are going down to the championship, getting relegated: Luton Town, Burnley, and Sheffield United. Very sad to see for those teams, but looking forward to some exciting newcomers into the league next season. But that is how our Premier League played out. Just a quick spoiler. Next episode, we are going to be breaking down our predictions that we made for the Premier League, scoring those, seeing who ended up doing better, and then looking at the Premier League overall and what that season was that we have just culminated with. But now I'm going to flick it back over to you so you can talk about France.
Yeah, it's an exciting one. Looking forward to breaking that next week, our Premier League breakdowns, because I think I got a slight suspicion I may have done a little bit well, but we'll see how it pans out. The French league was something that perhaps most people would have predicted in terms of the number one. It was obviously Kylian Mbappe's final season at PSG, where he goes, still to be determined. But of course, PSG with 81 points, and followed by Monaco, which a little bit surprising. I mean, they've had a fairly good run from the previous seasons, for example, but strong team overall. But a lot in terms of the breakdown from the 81, they actually had 68. So not quite a big bit. It's not necessarily a close race, but you could argue that PSG, this is their bread and butter. It was always going to happen. So PSG, Monaco, then a couple of newer teams have come in. So Brest, we had kind of come in, which was a great, solid performances overall, and great to see in Champions League spot now. So we'll be seeing Brest in the Champions League in third place as well, which is really great to see. Similar to what I got Aston Villa, right? So now you've got a solid teams that perhaps not your average, your Marseille or Lyon, for example, Lille, for example. So some more of a lesser known team, which is really great to see as well. Speaking of Lille, they were in the fourth place. And then you've got Nice, Lyon coming through as well, which is on the fifth and sixth, which you'd argue if you're a Lyon fan, you're looking at, you want to be hitting that top four space, hitting the Champions League. But the more established teams, for example, the more teams that are in terms of the French league, you got Marseille, which is in the 8th place. You got Lens, which was in 7th. Reims, Rennes, Toulouse, Montpellier, Strasbourg in 13, which is, again, good, solid performance from them. Nantes in 14, Le Havre, which has made the likes of Riyad Mahrez, of course, in 15th. And then you've got, unfortunately, the three teams which have been relegated and dropped down into the league below. Metz, Lorient, and Clermont Foot, which have, my pronunciation is probably awful, but French league. We're not all trained in that area. So great performances from Brest and Nice as well, in particular, getting those kind of that top 3, top 5 sort of positions, which is great to see. But normal business resumes with PSG, again hitting that 81 points as well in general. Interesting to see how they'll pan out next season without their talisman Mbappe, but solid performance from more teams in that one. So excited to see how that works out for next season. Gonna flip back to yourself for the Spanish league and Liga.
We're going to Spain. It's actually not a country I've been to yet, but it is certainly on the list, especially with all of the good soccer that happens over there. Typical league structure that you'll see, the top two, Real Madrid, Barcelona. This league was actually wrapped up a couple weeks ago, so we knew that Real Madrid was going to claim that top spot. Kind of a bumpy season for Barcelona overall. Started hot, and then it kind of was a roller coaster ride up and down. So a pretty clear win from Real Madrid taking that number 1 spot, Barcelona in that number 2. Girona taking that number 3 spot. It's been an exciting season for them and having a lot of good soccer being played. Not necessarily a team that you expect to be in the top 3, let alone at the top half of the table per se in the Liga. So they are going to be in your Champions League spots. So that's going to be exciting to see how they keep their team together, hopefully in this offseason, and then they're able to compete in the Champions League next year. Atletico Madrid, your typical bigger club, ending up in 4th. In La Liga, then Athletic Club below them in 5th, Real Sociedad rounding up that top 6 for you. And then this table, essentially, you could kind of see the clear delineation between quality this season. So there hasn't been really a title race, or really even for those top 6 spots. You kind of knew where teams were going to fall for the most part as we rounded off the end of this season. Then we'll just knock out your top 10. Villarreal in 8th, Valencia in 9th, and Alves in 10th. The one I will just throw in there, number 11, Osasuna. That is an interesting one because there are some Americans that have shown some interest in Osasuna because there's been this movement of Americans trying to figure out more middle table clubs to support. And for some reason, Osasuna is one of those clubs that a lot of Americans are getting behind. So Osasuna making some moves, at least staying in the middle of the table. So that is what La Liga ended up looking like. It'll be curious to see some of the moves that some of these top tier clubs will make, and then what Girona will be able to do next season as well. That is La Liga. Put a bow on it. She's done. Now let's go over and look at Germany.
Yes, of course. German league, arguably the most exciting league we've had this season for one reason, and one reason only. That is, of course, Bayer Leverkusen. That's what we're going to call it. Bayer Leverkusen.
Bayer never losing.
I'm trying to say never losing, but I can't get it out. But there we go. Bayer never losing. Bayer never Leverkusen. Of course, top of the league. I'm just looking at the stats here. That is 0 losses, 6 draws, and 28 wins. I mean, incredible performance from Xavi Alonso. 90 points, top of the league, comfortable. And then it got interesting in the second and third. So this is something that perhaps Bayern fans won't be massively happy with on the last sort of match of the season to lose and to have Stuttgart taking that second space. That adds to the Bayern's woes, who I don't think are now which have just announced Vincent Kompany, which is an interesting one, with relegated Burnley as their new manager. So that'll be interesting for next season. Stuttgart, obviously, in second, as we just said earlier. RB Leipzig, they take the top 4 spaces. And then you've got Borussia Dortmund, who arguably having a better season in Champions League than they've had actually in their own individual league. So really great to see them do well in that tournament, which, you know, when they're in their own individual league, perhaps they weren't really flying on all colours, really. So from that perspective, Eintracht Frankfurt in 6th, and we've got Hoffenheim in 7. Going through, we have 8th. We have Heidenheim, Werder Bremen, Freiburg, Augsburg, Wolfsburg, which I think they probably deserve better as well. We got Mainz, Mönchengladbach in 14th. If you thought Bayer Leverkusen was hard, that was probably harder. Union Berlin, which had a very good season the previous season before. Union Berlin. And then you've got VfL Bochum, Köln, and Darmstadt in unfortunately being relegated. So interesting setup near the top in particular. So very happy, obviously, for Bayer Leverkusen for their unbeaten season. Will we see that again next year? It's next season. We'll see. They still have Xavi Alonso for now. And there isn't many, from what we hear reports at the moment, many players as in leaving or being transferred at the moment. So it might be one of the few clubs not getting ripped apart, which would be interesting to kind of see. Bayern will be hoping to do better next season, so that'll be an interesting one to watch for sure. Excited to break that one down. Now, obviously, we've done all the leagues. It's been an interesting season, as we are here for. Bayer Leverkusen, you alluded to it earlier. You want to perhaps touch upon that in terms of your take it or leave it. Let's bring that. Let's nicely link that into the take it or leave it. What you got for us?
Here is my take it or leave it. I'm interested to hear your opinion on this with your English bias. So here we go. Take it or leave it. The Bayer Leverkusen invincible season is better than Arsenal's invincible season. You taking it or you leaving it?
So I had a feeling this may come up. So I've kind of seen this flying around social media. And my initial thought is, and I feel like this, I'm going to say it's a bit of a cop-out. I hold my hands up, this is a cop-out. I just don't think you can compare the two. That's my initial thought. I know. I know. But let me break down why, and then I'll give you my honest answer, right? So the type of football and the brand of football is very, very different from both sides, right? Like the way we're playing at the moment and the way the performances and in terms of the way football, the strategies that have been implemented in both times, that in that kind of different periods, I feel like you can't really compare. However, I would, my personal preference, my personal, if you ask me, I just feel that Premier League team, that Invincibles league in particular, was an extremely hard league. That had the likes of Manchester United in, that had the Chelsea team, that had a solid, that's when Man United and Arsenal had a crazy rivalry. The Vieira, Mike Keown, it's a solid team in a very, very hard league, and the team around them were not letting them live, right? It was a solid performance. So for me, in comparison to perhaps the German league, where you've got arguably Bayern Munich probably weren't great, and were really the only real competition in comparison by Leverkusen, I would probably say the Arsenal team probably nicks it for me in terms of being the better of the two. But what Xabi Alonso's done with that group of players, them not all being stars, and Xabi Alonso being a less seasoned manager. Arsene Wenger was a senior manager at the time, right? Performances-wise. So, but I would still say that makes me sound as if I'm saying football's easier now, but I'm not saying that. But I feel like the league, the English Premier League, was much harder in that time. So for the Arsenal to have the Invincibles and to have the league, the performance they did, for me, puts them above them. But again, you can't really compare them. That's what I'm going to say. Bit of a cop-out, but still on balance.
Well, let me tell you why you're wrong on this.
Okay.
So
run it.
I am going to absolutely say Bayern Leverkusen, their invincible season is much better than Arsenal's for multiple different reasons. So one, they stopped a league dynasty of 10 years. So Bayern Munich, 10 years just at the top, easily winning, tons of money, bringing in the top players. To stop that, big chunk, tough to do. On top of that, they only lost one game the entire season, and that was in the final of the Europa League. Now, if we go back and look at Arsenal, they lost multiple games in the different cups that they played in that season. They didn't even make it to the finals. So that alone, another check on the box for Leverkusen for me. Then if we get specifically into some of the details, that I did research on this because I do think that this is better, and I think the hype deserves to be more. There was so much hype when Arsenal did this. I think Leverkusen deserves to have more hype. Sure, it's out there. Everyone's talking about it, but I think it's just so impressive what has been done. So Leverkusen have won 82.4% of their Bundesliga matches this season, compared to the Gunners claiming victory in just 68.4% of their Premier League fixtures. So quite a disparity of Leverkusen winning more games overall during the season. So just another checkbox for Leverkusen. On top of that, your league argument, I would agree that those top tier teams in the Premier League during, I think it was the 2004 season for Arsenal when they were invincible, their competition at the top was more difficult than it is now. However, I think the Premier League is actually more competitive now than it used to be back then. I think some of those mid-tier teams and some of the lower bottom teams in the Premier League are actually a bit more competitive. So you see like Aston Villa actually making some noise in the Premier League now. I know you can argue maybe that's because the top tiers are just not as good as they used to be, but I think overall the competition level, at least from the bottom half of the table, has been lifted since then. So I know it's difficult to maybe compare the season because, yes, football is different. The structure of the teams are different now looking at that. But I would say overall, just comparing these two accomplishments, for me, Leverkusen just ended up being better during their invincible season than Arsenal did for me. So that's why I would say Leverkusen have a deserved title of Invincibles purely over Arsenal's Invincibles because of those reasons.
Nice. Well, you came with the receipts. I cannot argue the receipts, right? I mean, yeah, I'm with you. If you look at the numbers for sure, right? If you're comparing victories, etc. Yeah, you're bang on. I'm just looking at it purely from like a league perspective and sort of seeing the teams in the Bundesliga, you drop them into the Premier League in that time. I just don't think the level will be the same, but I totally agree. I think numbers wise, of course, Thierry Henry, like these are the players, and I think maybe perhaps it is like you said, my English bias as well. Like watching that team, and also in the UK, and knowing a lot of Arsenal fans who do cling on to the Invincibles, like fair play. I feel like it's similar. It's just, like the same way, we cling on to the class of 99. I feel like the same way that, Arsenal cling on to the Invincibles. So, but yeah, I'm happy now. And the biggest thing for me is, like you said at the beginning, top of this, Bayern Munich, that now the fact that after 10 years has been broken down is so satisfying to see. So either way, everyone's a winner in my opinion. So yeah, I love it. Let me break you into my. Do you want to say something? Run it.
No, take it. Take me.
Oh, okay. Let me break it down into which again is an interesting one to kind of see, right? So I've got a stat here. So I was looking at Premier League. We're throwing it back to the Premier League now, and I'm looking specifically at days spent at the top of the table. Right, so in the 2023-24 season, right? So I'll start off with West Ham, where 2 days at the top of the league, right? So fair play, West Ham, right? Then it goes up to Newcastle, which were 7 days at the top of the Premier League. Then it goes on to Brighton, who we had a good start to the season. We were like, oh, fair play. De Zerbi did wonders out there. 7 days as well at the top of the table. Then it gets interesting, right? So you've got Spurs with 26 days spent at the top of the table. And now I'm going to leave it to you. I'm going to give it to you before I break this down. So you've got Liverpool, Man City, and Arsenal. Rank those in terms of who you think days spent at the top of the table. So you got Liverpool, Man City, and Arsenal. So who would you say you put down third? And I'll give you the numbers in set.
I would say City is in third, because I do remember it took them a little bit of time to get rolling toward the end of the season. And we all know that they just have a second gear at the end of the season. So I'm going to put them in third. I'm going to actually have Arsenal first. And I know Liverpool had a good chunk, a little run. So I'm going to say Liverpool is second. How does that actually break down?
Well, you're absolutely wrong. So, what we got here is you have Arsenal on 76 days. Right, so Arsenal were third, spent 76 days at the top of the Premier League table, followed then by Man City, who had 78 days at the top of the league, of the top of the Premier League. Then Liverpool with 87 days at the top of the Premier League table.
They let me down.
So my question to you is, did Liverpool bottle the Premier League?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to leave that, though, because I don't think they bottled it necessarily. I think that they were in the driver's seat for a while, and it really came down to injuries and just not having the depth quite yet to finish out a season the way that Manchester City does. And the only reason I'm going to say that they didn't bottle it is simply because going into any season that City has that second gear. So you have to expect and plan for that happening when there are the last 5 weeks of the season knowing that City will grind out those wins, and you have to be able to do the same. So I guess in the long run, they could have bottled it simply because maybe they've not built their roster appropriately to handle that final chunk of the season. But overall, it doesn't really feel like they were there to lose it. It just felt like they were always still needing to try to compete to be there. So if anything, I feel more so like Arsenal bottled it because they were in the driver's seat when it came down to some of those final game weeks of the season. They could have maybe fended off City a little bit better because I know they had some kind of crazy results where they lost like a game 1-0 with like 4 weeks to go or something like that, which could have been the difference. So I really feel like Arsenal were the ones that kind of shot themselves in the foot more so than Liverpool did. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think from a numbers perspective, you can't lie. I think Liverpool, the fact how they were at the top of the league for so long, there's something's obviously gone wrong there. Like you said, injuries or like in terms of the club, something's happened there. But I think for me, and I think you've kind of said it earlier as well. For me, Arsenal's performances near the end of that league just did not read them justice. And it's that level. And I think for me, I think what I wanted to kind of my point in that initial sort of facts was I think not enough is said. I think a lot is said about Arsenal bottling the league. But really, you could argue that from a numbers perspective, Liverpool technically were in the driving seat for most of the year, right? So 87 days in the top of the Premier League and you end up third. I mean, that means there's a decline somewhere in the team, obviously, later on in this thing. But there's 87 up, there's opportunities there, and if they kind of clung on, they would have followed your prediction, right? In terms of the first in the league. So, but no, I'm with you. Like I said, it says a lot for Arsenal near the end of the campaign. They should have been better and really pulled out the bag really near at the end of the season.
Speaking of bottling things, I would like to get a little bit political with you very quickly because there is a new headline that came out a day or so ago about Borussia Dortmund's new sponsor. So they had like the 1&1 block sponsor. I don't even know what sponsor that is. So maybe that wasn't the best sponsorship from whatever company did that. But they have a new one that will go on the front of their jerseys upcoming season. And it is an arms dealer. So I want to kind of get your thought on what it looks like for sponsorships, because we've had this conversation before previously about gambling companies and betting type of organizations being main sponsors that are very public in the Premier League and other leagues around. So now we're getting into a space where an arms dealer is going to be a headlining sponsor of a very popular soccer club. How does that make you feel? Are you for that? What is the politics behind it? What's the vibe?
For me, it doesn't surprise me. I think where there's football, there's money, and whatever the sponsor, as long as it brings in money for the team. I think, unfortunately, a lot of top executives are willing to look the other way. And I think if you look deeper into a lot of different clubs, there's probably other links which are probably less apparent than perhaps an arms dealer. But to say as well, in terms of where we are politically as a world, it's not the right tone at all, right? So if you look at the current state of play at the moment, putting that front and center for millions of people to see, for me, seems quite disrespectful to a lot of the world and in terms of what's happening at the moment politically at the moment. So for me, it almost takes it another step. So you've gone from, the alcoholic brands, for example, which from back in the day, the Carlsberg and those sorts of brands where it was more putting that front and center. And then you go into the betting and it feels like we're just trying to push the envelope here in terms of where the money is, who's willing to pay them more, put you on the front and center of it. I think there definitely needs more governance behind this because what is there to say that you're not going to have, even more different brands, for example? Perhaps what would you say? I mean, you've obviously got countries, for example, like, you've got what we talked a little bit about the sports washing element of it, right? Like what is stopping then, for example, countries, essentially putting their whole brand in front of it and what stops them from doing what they're currently doing with arms dealers, right? You could argue that, like certain clubs, for example, and certain I'm trying to toe the line here. I don't want to sort of say anything in particular, but there are definitely clubs that perhaps are toeing the line when it comes to, say, money and where that money has come from, right? So it's an interesting balance. But like I said, wherever there's money, there's going to be people and clubs who are looking to sort of snap that up. Will it stop? I don't think so. Will it get worse? Probably. But there needs to be some form of governance on this. The steps taken by the betting companies in the Premier League is going in the right way. And I think other clubs and other countries probably need to follow suit. What are your initial thoughts?
It's pretty much the same as yours. Money rules overall in the entire world. So then when it breaks down from governments and then it goes further down to organizations, like, money is always the top thing that everyone thinks about. And then you break it down even further, like, people work jobs to make money so they can do what they want with their time in life. So when it comes to sporting organizations, it's really the same vibe. Unfortunately, money is going to rule a lot of the decisions that are made, and that's not going to change anytime soon. You even look at our examples with Manchester United. Like, money is really the root cause of all of the drama and poor decisions that have been made at Manchester United by the Glazers for almost 2 decades now. It's just really disappointing that that is the case. You'd love to see clubs being run in a way where they make the decision to say, hey, this is a ton of money, but like, we have other revenue streams and other sponsors that would maybe not pay us as much, but still enough to help us sustain. And it's going to be a much better look instead of using an arms dealer, putting them front and center and participating in sports washing. Because I'm a marketing person myself. So that's literally what happens when you have like Gazprom or whatever that massive Russian or Ukrainian oil giant was that was on the front of a couple different teams. Yeah, right, exactly. So that is essentially sports washing, because you want to look and have the appearance of your company being associated with something good, even though you're doing something negative. So it's the same vibe here. An arms dealer, an arms manufacturer, creating a vibe of saying, hey, we're sponsoring a really cool team that everyone loves. So that means that good association will kind of filter through to our brand as well. So it is a good marketing tactic, but unfortunately, it should not be used in this way by companies that do negative things per se, and trying to get that to influence not only the sport, but then also think of all the young fans that are going to be brainwashed or sport washed, essentially, to think that this brand doesn't really mean anything other than, hey, it sponsors the cool soccer team that I support. When it all breaks down, again, like you had said, money is really the reason for all of these decisions. I wish there was some better governance, but we've seen even the corruption in FIFA and all of the different world soccer organizations. So I really don't have much hope for things getting better. It is cool to see some of the gambling things improving a bit. So that's at least one little glimpse of hope that maybe some things will change. But for me, the money is just so influential. So I don't really see anything changing like that anytime soon. And it's the same in MLS. MLS does have some more structures to prevent certain things from happening, but then you still see the corruption. There's no open system. All of it is influenced by money at the end of the day. So it's really the same everywhere you look, in every organization, in every country, even within our own communities. Like, money really does inspire a lot of change for the positive and the negative.
Bang on. It's an interesting question because, like you said already, like, where does it stop, right? What is going to happen in terms of wherever the money goes, and there's never going to be an opportunity where it doesn't kind of bring into play. Saudi Arabia's proven that, right? In terms of the Saudi League flocking there purely from a monetary perspective, and they want to try and boost their economy and boost the branding of the country. So, it's going to be an interesting one to kind of keep an eye on and follow along, really. As we close out this episode, we also want to do our Nutmegged of the week. I'll break down mine first really quickly. It's quick something I saw about a bit of like family politics, moving from politics to family politics here a bit. So obviously we know the footballer Endrick, obviously Real Madrid. We're starting Real Madrid, currently plays in Brazil. We're starting for Real Madrid next season. Him and it's quite a bit of a social. I think it might be just like a personal issue. I'm not sure. So his girlfriend, and there's a picture of his girlfriend and his mom and his family, for example, like in a picture. And everyone's seen the actual photo of him, saying ex-girlfriend, his mom, etc. And what's happened is his mom gone on social media, and she has cropped out the girlfriend of Endrick's and has publicly said that he's too young to get married. So there's obviously something going on there. Hendrik's obviously in the middle of all this because he just wants to play football, but his mom and his girlfriend are obviously not getting along, and his mom has decided to take it out on social media and let her know her thoughts, should we say? So funny, not good for Hendrik, but a bit of a nutmeg in terms of let's try and keep this. It's not air our dirty laundry out, but rolling out on social media now. So that's that for me. What do you got for us?
That's quite a nutmeg. That is sad. Like, you would think, your son is like a solid soccer player and has the potential to get even better playing for Real Madrid and Brazil, like a cool career ahead of him, many years, hopefully. But then get on the same page. Like, come on, know that is going to hurt his brand by bickering in public and causing all this drama. And plus, you don't have to deal with that. Like, that's just so much stress at home when you're trying to be a professional footballer. Craziness. So mine also has to deal with politics. Unfortunately, a little less funny, but much more stupid. So let's dive into this. 3 players on the women's side have quit Argentina's national soccer team in a dispute over not being paid and because of poor camp conditions. Unfortunately, this is a thing that we're seeing across the world with a lot of the women's national teams, their organization overall just not being up to par and not treating the players appropriately. So this is just the latest example. So there are 3 starters that have normally been in the lineup that have said, I'm done. We're not going to be playing for the Argentinian national team anymore. It's goalkeeper Lorena Oliveros, defender Julieta Cruz, and midfielder Lorena Benitez. They're all regular starters. They walked out, and then Cruz posted and said, yeah, we're just tired of all these injustices that are happening. And technically, or not technically, I guess it could be technically, but what the person is that is supposed to be the best ever Argentinian female soccer player, Estefania Bonini, which many people have said is the best ever female player for Argentina, has come out and supported her 3 former teammates because she has also made the decision last year to stop playing for the national team. And just one example of all the terrible things that have happened is just like the stupidest thing, which is why I wanted to include this, is that during a national squad training camp, they've had sessions where they receive ham and cheese sandwiches and a banana. Like, that's the meals that they get during their national team training camps. Like, that is what we would give our high school players at Buckeye Valley High School after we come back from a game. Like, literally the exact same thing in little Ziploc bags. That's what they are giving to Argentinian national team players, is the same food and snack things that we were giving Buckeye Valley High School players. That's so ridiculous. Unfortunately, it has to be a nutmeg talked about. It's not a fun one, but it's just something that is so stupid that continues to happen on the women's side of national teams that should not be in the sport. So it's just a very unfortunate nutmeg that at least we can talk about, bring light to, and hopefully someday things will freaking change.
I mean, that makes total sense. Like, yeah, it's such a disaster to see that in terms of for women's football. It's just really poor to see. More needs to be done for sure. So I think that's hopefully going to improve with time, and I think we'll definitely get to that stage. But I think it's really poor to see, especially Argentinian men's football, well, in particular, being such the pinnacle of world football, to not have the same happen for the women's game is really awful to kind of see. So hoping there's some improvement there with time. Okay, so another jam-packed episode. It's been great chatting, obviously. End of the season now as well. Looking forward to breaking down our predictions. Looking forward to breaking down our league from the previous season, and we're looking to break down more football as time goes on as well. So it's been a pleasure as always, mate. We'll catch up again soon. Any final words?
Last thing is, make sure you just follow us on Instagram at Nutmeg Podcast. You can also check us out on TikTok. If you do want to be a part of the show, you want to drop in some take it or leave it or listener questions, just hit us up in the DMs on Instagram and we'll plug you in. Hit us up with your interesting topics. Make us think hard, please.
Exactly. Love that. Appreciate it, guys. Speak to you guys soon. Have a good day.
Peace.